So what's more important than ROI? My name is Nick Palkowski, and this is The Power of Podcasting, and today we're going to be talking about just that because I am joined here with Spencer Smith. Spencer, thanks for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me, Nick. Appreciate it.
So Spencer, why don't we start out by just talking a little bit about who you are and how you got started in this whole social media world?
My name is Spencer X. Smith. About January 2015 or so, I entered the social media world and I had left B2B sales. So I used to have a job for a big company where I was a corporate sales guy, where I traveled around for about 7 years and did about 3,000 in-person sales meetings. Wasn't allowed in that industry to really use social media at all to like and share and comment and actually grow my business. So when I left that industry, went headlong into social media, learned it for about 4, 5, 6 months, tried a bunch of stuff, and then came up for air and started sharing what I figured out.
Oh, that's awesome. So why do you say, you had the saying that something is more important than actual ROI? When most business people, when they think about what's the biggest thing, it's always ROI. How do we get a return on investment for all the time that we're spending in social media? But you say that's not the biggest deal.
Yes, and the reason I say that is because it's really hard from an attribution standpoint to look at business development and say this equals this equals this. So unless you're running purely e-commerce, so it's click, buy, and you can trace all the way back, what was that originating thing that happened? Business development is it's traditionally really hard. Like we don't know which in-person phone call or email or handwritten note or seen somebody at a networking event or whatever played out. So I see social media as the greatest way there's ever been to scale us. And digital marketing in general, not just social, but podcasting or web writing or anything that's digital where it doesn't degrade by way of how many times you replicate it. The more that we can show up on people's radar over and over again and have them think about us and eliminate that chasm between thinking about you and not thinking about you, I think it's just the greatest thing that's ever been for doing that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I love this because one of the things I know I like to talk about pretty regularly is just the power of actually creating content and then repurposing it into several different channels, which is kind of a way of making sure people see you in more than one place. Do you have any recommendations, I guess, in terms of a content creator out there who actually, how do they make sure multiple people are seeing this? How do they actually make sure they're showing up again and again and again?
I think the big thing is just don't worry about saturating your market. And so by that I mean there's an old adage in sales that things work so well that you stop doing them, that people become accustomed to their own activities or their own successes. So what I mean is they go, hey, I got really excited about this piece of content, I used it, and now, well, hasn't everybody seen it? So why should I keep repurposing it? Aren't they going to get sick of me? And you and I know, especially organically, the likelihood of people seeing your stuff is so low. And many things repeat warrants listens or visits or whatever. Like every song that you've ever liked. I mean, you haven't listened to it once. Right. You're like, hey, I'm done, right? It's like,
exactly.
No, I want to hear that reinforcement of what I know to be something I like.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. So what are some strategies that people can actually use to help get this return on an awareness?
I try to think in terms of how we can show up constantly on the people's radar that we're tracking. So maybe the best way to play this out is if you're an in-person marketer, like you go to networking events, you show up at conferences or whatever, either preface that conference or that event with highlighting other people on social media that you know are going to be there. So when you see them there, you have something to talk about. And then also as another alternative or as just a complete strategy, as a follow-up as well, be sure that you take a picture with somebody at a conference or at an event, tag them on social, share it so they can recollect who the heck you are, because that honeymoon period, after a networking event, after a conference, like we're all going to be best friends, and that's like, shoot, what was your name, right? So as we can just try to keep reminding people who we are without being self-serving, right? Like here's something that I thought you might be valuable based on these limited amount of notes that I took and based on me using social to help you look good. Like I see that as being, if you're the purveyor of good news, it's so important.
Well, a couple of points that I really love there is just that fact of, just follow up really quickly with an image, like with a pic, just tagging people. Because people want those pictures out there anyways. They want to show that they've been at events. They like I always like when I get tagged in pictures. So that's just a super simple step that people can take that I think so many are missing. I know I don't do that nearly as often as I should. But then I really loved that you just kind of dove in there and said, really what you're trying to do is help them look good, help them feel good. How can you help put that person kind of elevate their status?
And this maybe just as an example, right? So let's say you win an award. I mean, any of us are predisposed to think about ourselves and say, hey, look at me and look at this great award that I won, right? But if you share that and say, look at me, people are going to be proud of you because they legitimately will be. But what if you go that step further as well and you look for other people who have won a similar award, whether it's in that same category or by that same magazine or website that's putting out the awards, or maybe in a similar industry where you go, hey, this is something that I know that you've accomplished it, and as an award winner myself, like I know I can empathize with how hard it is to achieve those things. So and there's this entire industry called PR, right, that used to be controlled by a finite amount of media companies, and now that we all have our own media companies, if we can be that, once again, purveyor of good news about other people, and people will just flock to you that way.
Yeah, I love that. And exactly like you're saying is really we have the power no matter where you are. You have that kind of PR engine. You are a media company. So it's going out there and creating content around your brand, but that connects with other people and just highlights them. And I think that's crucial. So what would be some of your first suggestions that you have for people in order to kind of do just that?
The biggest objection that I hear from people is if I'm going out and taking pictures at events, isn't this just me creating the social pages of a newspaper or a magazine? So by that I mean like typical magazine, maybe a monthly magazine that comes out in your area, it'll say, hey, here are these beautiful people dressed beautifully at this beautiful event, right? It's like, well, that's a gala, right? It's not anything where you're trying to benefit your audience. So what I propose people do is say, okay, do this picture or do this video and highlight other people, but also frame it up in context as to what the social media platform actually is. In that sense, if you're on LinkedIn, say, here is a business reason why I'm sharing this picture, because I am highlighting maybe an organization or a company or some award winners. Or if you're on Facebook, just say, look, I want to let you know exactly what it is that people are doing in the community because it's more of a community engagement tool. So that's what I propose, man. Just think about the context of the platform first and frame it up so it actually makes some sense as to why you're sharing it.
Yeah, okay, I love that. So once we start doing some of this initial kind of reach out, this initial kind of getting on people's radar, following up after meeting them in person, what is that? I guess what does that next step kind of look like? Because really, that's just essentially one touch point or two touch points with that one individual. How do you scale this up, if you will?
Yeah, my best idea there is to try to train the algorithm on whatever platform you're on to show more of you to those people. So that initial entree into connecting with that person and then sharing something with that person then will like, which trains the algorithm a little bit to show more of your stuff. But I would make it systematic to say, just put a tickler thing out there every month, maybe every couple months to say, let me do a quick Google search for this individual, the company for which they work, do another thing highlighting that person, once again tagging that person, so you show up in their feed again, undoubtedly, right? Because you tag them, and then they'll obviously like that and share it again. So that likelihood of having them see more and more of you by training the algorithm and constantly sharing good news without asking for anything in return.
I love that. So what are some mistakes? You've been out speaking kind of about this thing pretty regularly. What are some of the mistakes that you see people making who try to implement a strategy like this?
Two things. Either they only share stuff about themselves, which is fine because that has such a limited shelf life first. But the second thing, man, is people thinking too tactically.
Okay.
And so the way I mean this is if you think about maybe some infographics that you've seen before that say, here are undoubtedly the best times to post on Facebook and Twitter and stuff, right? And they might have some validity. I mean, I think they all vary based on company and industry and individual. But
market.
So they might have some validity. But my really big hesitation about people using anything tactical like that is they go, okay, I'm going to try this social media thing. I've done my research. Here's the best time to post. And they post, and then they get no engagement. And they're like, oh, shoot. Yeah. None of this stuff works. It's like, no, it's because you were thinking like a quick shortcut tactical idea as opposed to thinking like, what am I going to do to serve my audience consistently?
Yeah, or they feel like, hey, this is the time to post. I can't post any other time, or like I'm not going to worry about it any other time. Social media is very organic, is very social. It's came out of our life just by the way we like to live it. So it's natural that we just need to be out there and just need to be reaching out, just need to be connecting. Like you call people at random hours, like you don't just, or you text people at random hours. So it's trying to make it a little more human, really, is what it's all about, I think.
I don't know if I came up with this or if I heard it somewhere, but I say that success on social media is much more biological than it is mathematical.
Nice.
And for some reason, people say like, "Oh, it's zeros and ones, so don't you just push buttons at the right time?" And it's just not true.
I love that saying. That is awesome. So what are some? So, can you give us some examples of like this strategy, this kind of strategy, really, of people who do this very well?
Yeah. Maybe the best way is to frame it up in context. So I used to have this job where you and I are recording this right now in Madison, Wisconsin. I used to drive 5.5 hours down to Indianapolis. That's where my sales territory was back in 2008. I would drive down there 5.5 hours, work during the business week, and then travel back on Fridays. Yeah. So 5.5 hours each way. Monday morning, though, if I want to make it on time for my 9 a.m. in Indy, I had to leave Madison at 2:30.
Yes.
So I had 2:30 to 8 a.m. in the car.
That's rough.
And I didn't know what to do with my time, right? So like a typical person, I would like listen to audiobooks or listen to music or whatever. But what I realized, man, is if I could start leaving systematically voicemail messages for the people that I was targeting, my prospects, that were actually of benefit to them, that started working. And so by that, I mean, and this is the classic mistake I've made so many times as a sales guy, whether it's a in-person meeting or a phone call or maybe an email subject line, I would just follow up or check in or touch base. And which is just a polite way of saying, so do you want to buy yet? Or do you not want to buy yet?
Right.
Check in, touch base, or following up. So instead of that, I started leaving these voicemail messages over and over and over to about 160 people or so over these 5.5 hours. Same voicemail message over, and I'd say, hey, this is something that happened in the sales field last week. Here was the situation. Here's how we fixed it. So it's basically content marketing one at a time, right?
Okay.
Best case scenario, 160 people in 5.5 hours would think about me. Yeah. And whether they listened to the entirety of the voicemail or not was immaterial because they would actually think about me. And so if you think about that in context with social, like we could spend minutes and reach hundreds if not thousands of people just by making that a supplement to your business development activities. Like not to supplant everything else you're doing, it's just take a few minutes, make it known that you're trying to serve your audience, and then go from there. So that's the big thing, man. It's just make it a systematic activity.
No, I love that because one of the things that I think with social media or just like email marketing or any type of content marketing, anything along marketing lines nowadays, it seems, is we always want to jump to the automation piece. You know, we want to just do it once, have it done with. But again, this is human to human relationships. So it's important, have a system, but ultimately do a little more manual reach out, a little more, send them a message on Facebook. Don't just use bots or anything like that, but actually record a personal video for them and send that to them so that they know you took the time to actually do this for them personally. It's going to mean a lot more, and then I think you're going to also see better results that way.
And the other thing, man, just to frame up against in context, right? So I'm older than probably a lot of people who are in this business. I'm 41 now, so I have some business experience that's not technologically related, right? So used to play in a band. 2002, I found out that promoters are really the people who have the vast majority of the power as to if you get to play as an opening act for a big band. Like they're the ones who decide. It's not because they're touring with other bands. It's typically based on local stuff. So I call this promoter. I'm like, how do we get to be on these shows? He's like, well, I need a website. I'm like, hey, I can do a website. Like I'm kind of a techie guy, right? So, okay, what do you want people to do on a website? 2002. He goes, well, I'd love people to go there, hit a button, play a song, and hear the song and go, oh yeah, that's who that artist is, and therefore I want to buy tickets. Okay? And I go, all right, that's fine. We can do that. But what's your budget? And he's like, well, wait, I thought this was, you scratch my back, I scratch yours. I'm not going to pay you for this. I go, no, you're not going to pay me to do the website. What's your bandwidth budget? Like, you have to pick up and send a song all the way across the internet, and that's going to cost you money. And that's a song, man. That's audio. But think about now, to your point, we can send personalized video messages for free. It's mind-blowing. And the fact we don't see more of that, it's like, take advantage.
I know, it is crazy. So we were talking just earlier about how I have a summit coming up. Well, one of the big ways that I got a lot of speakers for that was actually doing the personal video. That's the way I got some of the bigger name speakers because they don't always get that. And again, it's building that relationship. So it's I think that's the key thing is thinking about, okay, we'll still have these automation pieces. We'll still have these systems in place. And even setting up, your system of, hey, let's reach out every single morning. That's a system. But how can we make it more personal? I think that's super key. So Spencer, you talked a little bit briefly about being in a band, and I happen to know your story and that you some of the backstory that you have. But why don't you talk just a little bit about how you can actually go out and get some PR? Because I know that's going to be a huge thing for our audience. Is how do we actually get on other podcasts? How do we get other people to see us? How do we get some of that publicity out there?
Mm-hmm. This is a big lesson actually from our band is the hardest thing in the world is try to put on your own rock and roll show, because there's no inherent audience. You have to go and try to grab people off the street. So what we found is it's a lot easier to go to colleges, and I know you speak at colleges too. Colleges, venues that have bands, like festivals, or big things that are intimidating to most people, like Summerfest.
Yeah.
So just being sheerly naive and calling Summerfest and be like, how do we play here? The world's largest music festival. They will tell you. Because they need 700 bands, right?
That's a lot of bands.
So that idea of going where a need already exists and making yourself valuable, as opposed to trying to create your own scene, is what I see with PR. Now, so the best PR resource I found is called helpareporter.com. And for your listeners, this is free, and it's been so impactful for me, man, because when you sign up for it, you're going to get emails every business day, and it's going to say, hey, I write for TechCrunch, or Time Magazine, or the Chicago Tribune, or MSN.com, or whatever. And I need somebody to quote about this very specific thing. So as you scroll through these queries, you're either going to know it or you don't. And if you respond really quickly with like a 3 or 4 sentence email to say, hey, here's how I can benefit you, you're going to start getting quoted in major press. And because we can talk kind of nerdy here, right? It's not just the press exposure, but it's the backlink to your site. So from an SEO standpoint, right, it was just huge, especially from some of these huge sites. So I put together this one-page cheat sheet because I failed too many times to count when it actually comes to this. So it's spencerxsmith.com/PR. Distilled it down to a one-page cheat sheet. Here's exactly what to do. Here's the script I used to get in the Huffington Post for the first time. So just giving that away to your listeners.
Awesome. I love that thing, and definitely thanks for doing that.
Yeah.
So signing up for Help a Reporter Out, what does kind of the next steps with that really look like? I know we have the cheat sheet, so you don't need to dive too deep into that specific stuff, but what happens maybe even once you get a little bit of that exposure? Like how can you actually help it benefit your business?
A couple things. People feel like once you've been vetted by other things that are either comparable to them or just below or above them, then you're safe. So I would use those opportunities to say, hey, I've been quoted in here and here and here, and that's why I'm approaching you, is because now I have the confidence or the credibility, depending on how you look at it, to say now that these areas of business or news or whatever have vetted me, it's okay for you to feel good about me too. Because they don't want to get blown up, right? They don't want to look silly by way of what's happening. So if you think in terms of like, how can I help this person look good? Like once you have those initial quotes, then it'll play out for you.
Awesome. Well, trying to see if I think we might be having issues. It's always fun. Let's see if we can get it back up. That's one of the fun pieces about live. You never know what's going to happen.
I feel like we were jamming pretty well too, man.
We were. I think we were going. We were going good.
Yeah, I almost started taking notes. It's like, oh, that's good. That's a good one.
All right. Are we still going? I think we are still live. Let's check. We'll check. It might still be recording us too, which is always fun. They are getting the raw behind the scenes.
80% out the door is better than 100% in the drawer, man.
That's right.
Yeah.
Awesome. We are still live. So there you go. You got to see a little behind the scenes the way it looks. So trying to remember where we were.
Yeah. How do you leverage those initial opportunities?
Yes.
Right? By helping, by understanding that all people really want to do is do their jobs and fill a bunch of slots that they already have that they need to fill, and they want to feel good about doing that with you. So once you get those initial credibility milestones, what I'd propose people do is try to get contributor slots with certain publications, like Business to Community is super easy. LinkedIn's always good. Medium is always good. So continue to publish content and try to get that in front of other people.
And so what does that look like? You mentioned trying to get different contributor slots. What does that process kind of look like? Because I know a lot of our listeners might be just wondering about that.
Yeah, I would target publications first, and then search for how do you become a contributor, and then they'll typically either have an application, or they'll say, here's where you can fill out a Google form or send us a submission. So once you have some stuff where you can build up to that a little bit and say, here's why, Entrepreneur or Inc. or whatever, you should feel good about having me become a contributor for you. Mm-hmm. You can cite these things that you've already done, because that's really, once again, what they want, right? Is they don't want to look stupid. They want to be sure that you're a consistent content creator, which I know really bodes well in your world, right?
Absolutely.
You got to create consistently, but then knowing that you have that target in mind. So if you don't get it the first time, you get shot down the first time, you're okay, because you can always come back around.
That's awesome. So I guess, do you have any other tips, kind of revolving around just the PR, how to get known for your business in the social media world?
Yeah, probably the best story in brief is how I got into Forbes, and that was when I started sharing writers' content on Twitter and with my audience, and letting her know by way of tagging her that I was sharing her content, because she started replying to me and saying thank you. I was like, wow, this big, important Forbes writer is actually thanking me publicly, which made me do it some more.
Yeah.
And then after about 3 months, she actually reached out to me cold on my website and said, hey, it looks like we have a lot of similar interests. I'm writing this story. Do you want to be in it? And it was a feature about me, which was really cool, man. So it was just more so trying to find stuff that I felt was really good for my audience and letting the author know that I was sharing that stuff.
No, I think that's awesome, and I love how actually that story kind of brings everything all back around to what we were talking about at the very beginning. Is just you are adding value to your audience by sharing her content, but then you're just tagging her to kind of keep that top of mind awareness. Mm-hmm. So I think that's awesome the way that all kind of comes full circle, and that's just really what it is all about. It's trying to keep that cycle going and just stay top of mind, like you're saying.
Yeah, well said, man.
I love it. So, Spencer, any final tips, any piece of advice for our listeners out there on how to really stand out in the social media world?
For people who are listening right now, if you want to tag me on any of the social platforms and let us know, let Nick and I know that you listen to us here, I'm happy to share your content, because like any other content creator, I'm always looking for great stuff to share. And so if you can tag us with stuff that you're sharing, I'd love to share your stuff too.
Awesome. Well, Spencer, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for tuning in, and be sure to tune in next week. We're going to find out more on how to actually maximize your impact and your income.